double gavel.
Yeah, you do.
Again.
Wow. That was the most aggressive gavel I've ever done.
That is an aggressive. Still didn't work.
Third?
I'm not talking.
I think just start talking. Good evening. Welcome everybody. We appreciate you coming. We know you're all here for the taxation hearing, right? I'm sure that's why. If you, we will be having a student presentation in a little while, but we are required by law to have what's called a truth in taxation hearing prior to approving our levy tonight, later on tonight, which you guys don't have to stay for if you don't want to, but you're welcome to if you like. And that's scheduled to start now. So we need to run through the formalities of this taxation hearing. If you bear with us, we'll get started with our regular meeting at 7 and have the kids perform for us. So we're going to begin that taxation hearing now. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Lake Bluff School District 65 Board of Education Truth and Taxation Hearing for December 13th, 2016. Please take a roll call.
Mark Berry.
Present.
John Rosen.
Present.
Leanne Charlo, absent. Julie Gottschall, present. Richard Haig, absent. Philip Hood.
Present.
Susan Ryder.
Present.
All right, we got 5, we've got a quorum, we're going to begin. So the purpose of this meeting is to allow individuals the opportunity to be heard and comment on the proposed 2016 tax levy. We will begin with our business director, Mr. Jay Kahn, summarizing the proposed levy for us, and then we'll have comments from the board and comments from the audience or the public if they would like. So take it away, Jay.
Good. So as Mr. Berry has indicated, law requires a public hearing if a taxing body is asking for a levy amount in excess of 5% of an increase of the prior year's extension, excluding debt service. Our operating levy request, which was presented on November 8th and then again on November 15th, is 2.1% increase, so a hearing is not required, but we hold one because it is good practice to increase transparency and to allow the community to present testimony if they wish. I'm going to quickly go over the budget for this year, describe our sources of revenue, talk about the economic factors influencing the levy, and then give our administrative recommendation. Our operating budget for this current year is a balanced budget. You can see our revenues equal our expenditures. If you look at our total budget, we are using almost $6 million of fund balance in capital as part of the renovation of our middle school. You can see that most of our revenue comes from local property taxes. We only receive 8% of our funding from sources outside of that. And the levy that we're going to be talking about tonight will be collected, the taxes will be collected in June and September of next year, and they will be revenue for the 2017-18 school year. The primary factors that influence how much the district can levy, Shelley, it's not working again, are the consumer price index and the property value, change in property value, or the equalized assessed value. The consumer price index for this year was 0.7%, and we are expecting property values to go up by 6.2%. Also, this is just a regular reassessment year, so what that means is that we expect property values to move kind of uniformly across the taxing district. Shall we? One more. Sorry. No, one more ahead. Let's see if the amount of new property is important because this property has never been taxed before, so revenue from this property is incremental, 100% incremental to the district. We're expecting almost $8 million of new property added to the tax rolls this year, which is more than twofold increase over historical values. One more back, one more forward, sorry. Looking at this chart represents 6 years of history and 6 years of projections. In the early years on this chart, the district was levying more than it cost to operate the district, and as a result built a fund balance, which at its peak was close to $17 million. Since that time, in 2013-14, the board has abated taxes, and then in this current fiscal year is using a portion of that fund balance to renovate the middle school. So that brings us to 2016-17, our current budget year. We're projected to end the year with a fund balance in the middle of our target range of 30 to 50% of operating expenditures, or $6.2 million. Then going forward, these projections assume that we increase our levy annually by the consumer price index to keep pace with, so our revenue keeps pace with our expenditures. Revenue is projected to grow at about 1.1 to 2% a year, and expenditures are expected to grow at a slightly faster rate of 2.3% a year, which accounts for the shape of that curve. These projections are middle of the road projections, so they incorporate our current contracts and what we know to date, but they do not incorporate any significant risks due to school funding formula changes, pension reform, or any tax freezes. So
it could be worse.
yeah, so these are best projections that we have, but there is some risk in the forecast. So part of this recommendation is has the goal in mind to protect that fund balance for any downside risks.
And those numbers incorporate the savings that we incur through the bond restructuring we did.
Yes, those projections are kind of all in. They include all the savings from bond restructuring, the savings from moving out of our rented district office, and any other.
And the future savings we'll incur from the bond restructuring we're about to do.
Exactly.
Okay.
That savings is included, the one that hasn't yet occurred yet?
Well, that's pretty small, and that hasn't.
Okay.
I don't know what those savings are going to be yet, so I did not include
Okay.
those.
So there's a little bit of favorability, but not.
So the recommendation here, I can't point to it, is to increase our operating tax levy by 0.7% so that we can keep pace with our expenditure increases, to capture the impact of new property, which is going to be roughly $200,000 for a net levy of $14.7 million, which is a 2.1% increase. But then if you notice our debt service tax extension this year will be decreasing by 3.2%. So our total tax extension is only an increase of 1.4%. If you look at the difference between those two numbers, the 16.6 and the 16.83, that's $230,000. About $200,000 of that is due to the impact of new property, which we explained above. So the net impact to existing homeowners in Lake Bluff will be minimal.
From the tax levy
From
perspective.
from our tax
Appraisals
levy
can make
perspective.
it.
Yes, and that's assuming that everybody's property increases by the 6.2% average. If your property value increases by more than the average, you see a tax bill increase. If your property value increases by less than the average, you would see a tax bill decrease on an individual basis. What we talk about here is in aggregate. And that's the administrative recommendation.
All right, thank you, Jay. Any questions? So now we have the opportunity for the board to raise issues or ask questions. And if anybody would like to do that, feel free.
Could you go back to the multi-year, six years prior, 6 years forward? Yeah, that one. That one. So the two middle years where the red lines are far higher than the blue lines. Those are the construction of the middle school.
This is the construction of the middle school. This is this is not just operating, this is total expenditures, including debt service and construction.
And where we are in 2016, the blue line is roughly equivalent to where it was back in 2012. Right? So, I mean, we're basically back to where we were at the tax level that we were at 2012, despite building a middle school in the meantime.
Yeah. So this was our taxes. This is the revenue that the district brought in all in 2012. Which was the 2011 levy.
Right.
And then this represents the abatement, so you can see the reduction of taxes in these years. And so now we're starting to climb back to get back to the historical levels of
The purpose of that abatement in 2013-14 that you see in the blue line was to bring down, as I recall anyway, bring down the high, what was considered too high fund balance. That fund balance that was going up in the years prior to that. But we were able to retain enough of that fund balance that you can see that we didn't have to borrow the full amount of the construction in those 2 years. So we were able to use quite a bit of the fund balance to offset the cost of the construction. So bringing us now finally down to where we're in the middle of where we want to be. Right now, we can stay exactly where we want to be in the fund balance. So that 6.2 is right where we want to be. But you projected out, and I just want to make sure everybody understands this, projected out that we aren't going to be able to stay quite in the middle of that fund balance range. We're actually projected to go below it. Am I reading that right out in the 2000?
Right. So I know the consumer price index limits our ability to increase taxes, and it's been really low. So I'm projecting a 1.5% a year consumer price index, and the consumer price index measures the total inflation of a basket of goods. And the basket of goods that the school district consumes tends to be a little different than that. So we're mostly salaries and benefits. And those are going up by more than that consumer price index. So our expenditures are really growing faster than our revenue. Now we're fine for the first couple of years. There's a lot more uncertainty when you get into the out years.
Right. We're hoping to stay in the middle of that range, the little polka dot range there.
This year the consumer price index is running at close to 2%, so we could get more a higher consumer price index next year than I'm projecting.
I just think this is a really important chart for people to understand. We had quite a bit of fluctuation in prior years. We've now evened that fluctuation out and are really maintaining a pretty consistent level of tax increases to meet that minimum fund balance that we have.
And in conjunction with this abatement here, we also did a significant debt restructuring, paid down $7 million of debt, which helps us in the out years because it reduces our interest expense.
Well, we leveled out the payments as well.
Leveled out the payments and saved.
Otherwise, the debt structuring would have seen those red lines. The red lines would be higher in these years that we see.
Because we had significant amounts of debt out there, and it was structured so that the payments were increasing with time. And so
overall, really good news story, except for that little tail that worries me in the out years. But I appreciate that we're being conservative.
I think that's called conservative accounting.
That's true. That's true. And so thank you, Jay. I like this chart.
Okay. Now we offer the opportunity if anybody from the public would like to comment. Feel free, step to the podium. If not, we can move on. Sure. So, not hearing any further comment, I would like to
Close the budget hearing.
Yeah, like that. Having a mental breakdown here at 7:01 on December 13th. A motion to close. I'm sorry.
So moved.
Second. Roll call, please. No, all in favor of closing?
Aye.
Opposed? We closed. All right, so we're gonna at 7 o'clock. We're gonna start again. We can start right away. Okay.
We have to get the kids in though first.
All right.
So Kevin, or can someone go grab Nate with the kids because we're ready for them to come up.
Okay. The brain just stopped working there for a second.
Coming up. So you have a couple minutes. And when the kids perform, we're gonna all have to go out there. I wish I would have known you were coming. I have a present for you.
Lake Bluff School District 65 Board of Education regular meeting for December 13th, 2016. Julie, could you take a roll call, please?
Mark Berry,
Present.
John Morozen, Leanne Charlo absent, Julie Godshall present, Richard Haig,
Present.
Philip Wood,
Present.
Susan Ryder.
Present.
We have a quorum and we can begin, and so we're going to start the meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance. So if you guys will turn the flag and join me with the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And now we're going to skip right to our encore presentation, and we'll turn this over to Miss C.
Hey, I'm right here.
Somewhere over there.
There you go. Good evening. I'm Ann Svidkovich, Director of Choral Activities here at Lake Bluff Middle School. I would first like to take this opportunity to thank the members of the school board, Dr. Sophie and Principal Blackmer, for providing this opportunity to showcase the talent of the LBMS students. We're so pleased to be ending our annual holiday tour with you today. Today we have been performing throughout the community, making stops at the Wheelshire VA Hospital and the Lake Bluff Library. The students have worked very hard for tonight's performance of Grown Up Christmas List and a special version of Leonard Cohen's Alleluia with original lyrics written by our LBMS students. 78% of the Lake Bluff Middle School students voluntarily participate in chorus. Our new school facilities and incredibly generous Alliance for Excellence grant of almost $16,000 for the chorus and practice rooms provides an excellent environment for our students' growth and development. We're very excited. Next month we receive a special invitation to perform at the Chicago Wolves hockey game, so we're looking forward to that in January. Finally, I want to personally thank the school board, members of the administration, and parents for the consistent support of the fine arts at LBMS. Feedback from parents and students has shown that music education at LBMS, along with participation in extracurricular activities such as Encore and the annual musical, benefit both student learning and emotional growth. Thank you again for supporting these important activities at Lake Bluff Middle School, and here is Encore.
To you with child.
Okay, ready? 1, 2, 3. All right, you got it.
Thank you. They were wonderful.
Have a good night.
Mark, that happens after you turn 50. We're actually leaving Christmas morning. So, it's interesting with my boys because it's a different holiday. Actually, this Christmas is harder than last year. Believe it or not. They're adapting. They have to get used to their mother dating.
I'm gonna move on to the
Let's go.
board member recognition to the,
Yes.
and then we'll go back to the, I'll circle back to public comment.
Yes, because our teacher is here. Okay.
All right, we're gonna move right along. Thank you for bearing with us. And
I don't see Kathleen though, so hold on.
she's
Is she here?
Yeah, in the back.
She's here, okay.
We're going to do a little rearranging and go right to item 6B, which is our board member recognition. We did a little bit of this last week, and we're going to finish that up this week. So I'm going to turn it over to, who am I turning this over to?
Kathleen, I think who's introducing, you and Nate?
So Mr. Blackman, the principal of the middle school, will set this up for us.
So Mrs. Turner, she represents our student council this evening and has a student that she'll be introducing. We're finishing off our board appreciation presentations this evening. So Mrs. Turner, I'll let you do your introduction.
Hello, nice to see you all again. I have with me Lizzie Hardy, and she's going to present her interview that she did with Mrs. Gottschall. I really would like to recognize Lizzie really quickly because she came last board meeting to support her peers even though she was not presenting. So I'd really like to acknowledge that awesome leadership talent that she has before she presents. So thank you so much.
And you guys may want to lower the microphone so we can hear. There we go. Wow.
Hello, my name is Lizzie Hardy, and I interviewed Mrs. Gottschall. The first question I asked her was, "What do you do as a school board member?" She said, "Help oversee the curriculum, help administration, help build the school, and talk to the members of the schools." Question 2 was, "What do you enjoy most about being a school board member?" She said, "Learning about what the schools are doing." And helping our school. The question 3 was, "How much time do you spend being a board member?" She said 8 to 10 hours a month. Question 4 was, "What is one fact about you that nobody else will know?" She said that she just got a dog named Clyde. Question number 5 was, "How long have you been a board member?" She said she had been a board member since May 2013. The last question was, "What are you most proud of?" She said, "Building the middle school."
Wow. That was fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lizzie.
And Lizzie, just so you know, we think you did a great job of recognizing our board member for Board Member Recognition Day. It's so fantastic you came to support everybody. And we have, in fact, if you want to come up here, we have a certificate to give Mrs. Gottschall along with a special gift. Would you like to give this to her this evening and shake her hand? If you come up around this way, that's perfect. Come up over here, grab everything here, and I'm going to have you walk 2 doors down when I'm down here and give that to Mrs. Gutschall so you can shake her hand.
Thank you very much. It was a privilege to talk to you.
Good.
Thank you.
Good job.
Great job.
All right, so we're rearranging the menu here a little bit tonight, and we're going to circle back and offer the opportunity for anybody who would like to address the board for public comment. It's the opportunity if anybody would like to come to the podium, state your name and address, and address the board on any topic you think is relevant. Feel free to do so. And if you're not here and you want to do that, you could always do that by email and reach out to anybody on the board or Dr. Silver yourself. Not seeing anybody, I'm also going to ask the board for item number 5, if anybody on the board would like to suggest an item for discussion for tonight that is not on the agenda or recommend a future agenda item to be addressed on a future board meeting.
I have a couple of things. I want to remind everybody, one of the things that has been memorialized that we're covering in policy next month are some of the things that Juliet suggested policy-wise that we'll be looking into, so the policy committee will be reviewing those items. And secondly, we really will, in January, back our location of our board meetings. It's important to at least consider our high school, keeping in mind we have videotaping considerations and everything else. So that will need to be considered.
Good. Anybody else? No. So now we'll move on to the report section of our agenda, back on track. And it's my understanding that we do not have a middle school or an elementary school report.
You are correct. We're starting with Mrs. Rice.
And Mrs. Rice, Eva, would you like to?
I don't know if she's here.
Oh, no.
We're
Wendy.
with Wendy.
Wendy White from the Alliance for Excellence. 7D. You have no Eva here.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Good.
I'll just start with at our last grant review meeting, the Alliance Board approved a record dollar amount for grants for the teachers at the elementary school and the middle school. We were really pleased to award Miss C with almost, like she said, $16,000 to outfit her practice rooms for the kids. So in addition to that, we gave out almost $13,000. But I'm not going to tell you what we approved because Alliance is bringing back Grant Day. So I guess we used to do this. It was before I was on the board. So Grant Day this year will be this Friday, and some of the board members will visit the schools. And as some of you know, Alliance also has a neat new prop. We went giant check. So we're going to go and surprise the teachers, with the amount on there. And it's a neat photo thing. It's fun. When we first got it, it's a whiteboard check, so you erase it and rewrite on it. When we first got it, it was just the night of the concert, and so I went to write on there, and I thought, and I had to erase it again and write again, because I kept writing, and then it would get really, really small, and I thought, I am not a teacher, I don't know how to write, across a huge thing like that. So that was kind of fun. So we'll be doing that this Friday, so if people want to know where the rest of their money went, their donations, they can look at our Facebook page because we'll post it all on there with pictures on Friday. The Alliance for Excellence on Facebook. You can also donate to us through there, and it's super easy and really quick. And you can also donate to us because, since we gave away all of our money, it was all of it. So, which felt good to kind of clean everything out and use our donors' money. We will be looking for more donations. So our mailer should be out soon. If you haven't received it already, you should get it this week. You can also donate on our website, which is lb65alliance.org. Again, it's super easy on the website to do it electronically, and you get an immediate receipt, and it's all tax deductible. And don't forget to ask your companies for matching and all that. Get it cheaper. So I think that's it. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks for all you do.
Yeah, thank you, Wendy. Okay.
No report for our directors.
Nothing for Jay or Kevin. Okay. And then I don't have a president's report.
And I don't have a superintendent's report.
That was easy. So now we move on to the agenda items. Item 8A is our board plan and calendar. Dr. Sophie's going to review that with us.
And this will be very quick. I just wanted to remind everybody that as we plan for board meetings, we really take a look at our board planning calendar as well as what we did the year previous. We're right on task and target with everything. And when we catch up at our policy meeting the week that we return, we should be right on for next year. We're starting budgeting and planning for summer school and the next year when we get back in January. So I just wanted to remind everybody, and if anybody from the audience ever wanted to know generally what we do every month, we do have the Board of Ed planning calendar that lists the general topics for review. So, questions on that? Okay.
All right, so moving on to item 8B, and we're going to have an update on the
Yes.
Lake Bluff Middle School math program.
Right.
And that will be delivered by Dr. Sophie, Mr. Blackmer at the middle school, and Dr. Rubenstein.
And I am going to remain here, and again, this is just an update. Dr. Rubenstein, Mr. Blackmer, and I are here tonight to give you the update that you requested on math at the middle school. As you know, Dr. Holland and several key administrators from Lake Forest High School came to Lake Bluff Middle School several weeks ago to address math achievement in the transition between middle school and high school, because there have been a lot of questions and comments. First, we really want to applaud and thank Dr. Holland and her team for the collaborative spirit they have brought to our district this year. They're working very closely. We have a lot of mutual work going on, and we look forward to a productive relationship now and in the future. Several questions were addressed in the meeting at the middle school, which we are going to address in this update as you requested. Some of those questions that we're going to be answering are, is it true that we skip a grade for algebra readiness? Is it true that our kids skip a grade? What is AATH at Lake Forest High School, and why is it not at the high school this year? What does it mean when we talk about grade level acceleration when needed? What do we do with that with kids? And a concern that we've heard from parents, which the high school answered for us, is are our kids really ready for the math program at the high school? So with that in mind, I'm going to turn it over to Nate, who is our district historian, as you well know, and is going to talk to us a little bit about the history of where we are.
Did she just call me old? Yeah. Okay. That's okay. No, from the historical perspective, I'll start way back in 2011, actually, when we started working with Janice Heigl. She's a highly respected consultant and an expert in the field of math education. She's worked with the Gates Foundation, and she's worked with schools worldwide, as well as Lake Bluff Middle School and Lake Bluff Elementary School. In 2012, we adopted the Agile Mind program as our core curricular program. We'll be revisiting this as part of our regular curriculum cycle beginning in spring of 2017. The reason we decided to start the 6th grade students in a 7th grade Common Core math class was because the nuances between 5th and 6th grade Common Core standards were so similar that we could address them in the 6th grade year, therefore having all of our students completing algebra by the time they finish 8th grade. It's worth noting that our algebra readiness scores are among the highest in the state. Along with the adoption of the Agile Mind program, we identified the need to increase the amount of time dedicated to math instruction. That resulted in a change in our master schedule in 2013. At that time, we increased our average daily math instruction from 40 minutes a day to 60 minutes per day. Over the years, we made some minor changes. We continue to review the math curriculum and analyze student achievement data to determine if further changes need to be made. We're currently evaluating our programming to address the needs of students who need more support as they enter 6th grade into the 7th grade Common Core curriculum. It's worth noting this is about less than 7% of our students, and there's a variety of reasons why they may be struggling. One of the most common issues is that students who may be moving in from a district with a less rigorous math program may experience some challenge as they jump into that level of math. So I'll turn things over to Kevin. We'll talk a little bit about AATH, also known as Advanced Algebra Trig Honors.
Yep. So because of the fact that we compact the curriculum between 5th and 6th grade, I want to talk a little bit about the placement process that goes on at the end of 6th grade. So all students in 6th grade take some placement assessments First of all students take the regular MAP assessments, the winter MAP and the spring MAP assessment, and you guys already knew all about that. But then they also take the Orleans-Hannah Algebra Readiness Assessment. And then 6th grade math teachers complete, because we wanted to have some teacher input into it in a standardized way, so as to eliminate bias. And so we introduced the Renzulli learning scales related to math. And so all of that information is combined into one score, and we're given two trajectories for students. So the regular trajectory for students is that in 6th grade they would take 7th grade Common Core math. In 7th grade they would take 8th grade Common Core math. And then in 8th grade, they take Algebra 1. So it gives a pathway to Algebra 1 completion, which is the benchmark that we were looking for every student to be able to achieve. The advanced trajectory is that 6th grade students take the 7th grade Common Core math. 7th grade students take Algebra 1, so they skip another level there. And then 8th grade students take Advanced Algebra Trigonometry Honors, that AATH class. On top of that, there is a small number of students. And when I say a small number of students, between 2 and 4 in each class, 2 and 4 students in each class, who are performing so far above where their peers are, that even in that model, their needs couldn't be met. So even when we advanced them 2 and 3 levels beyond their need, they were still performing well above their peers. And so after working with Northwestern and examining that data, we made the decision to change their trajectory. So initially it occurred in 6th grade, now it's occurring even earlier, but in 6th grade, those students take Algebra 1. In 7th grade, those students take Advanced Algebra Trigonometry Honors, and then in 8th grade, those students take Plane and Solid Geometry Honors. Over the past 4 years, we've had a grand total of 7 students on that trajectory, and that's something that 4 years ago, we had 0 students on that trajectory. So it's really something that is relatively new to us as a district, and it speaks to the rigor of our curriculum and the level of preparedness that our students already have coming in there. So we also wanted to address some of the questions that had come up over time.
Just a quick question. The Plane and Solid Geometry students, do they take that in our building?
Plane and Solid Geometry honor students take it at the high school.
So that small group, and how much does that disrupt their schedule, their daily routine, by going to high school?
It's pretty disruptive, but we worked with them because it's a small group of students. It's 4 students right now. We worked with Lake Forest High School to schedule that class at a time where it wouldn't be terribly disruptive during the day, but it's disruptive nonetheless.
You know, it is. One of the things that we were able to accomplish, though, was students would leave their language arts class about 10 minutes early, 3 days a week, and then miss a little over half of the LA class 1 day a week, but then we're back in the building for the entire time for that 5th day. That is a result of that change in master schedule at Lake Forest High School. We use that day that they're back in the building as sort of a catch me up and get me prepared for the next day that we knew they'd be missing a large part of their LA class. So by scheduling it, working closely with Lake Forest High School, we were able to minimize, I think, some of the disruption for those kids in particular, and we really looked strategically to schedule that during the 7th period at Lake Forest High School to allow us to do it that way.
But they're still
still missing some LA class.
Good portion of it.
Which is going to go with some of the other issues they're addressing now.
And it's a challenge because the high school has a new block schedule where it's 2 out of the 3 days. It changes 2 days every week.
Exactly. So we wanted to talk with you a little bit about some of the specific questions that were asked of us. So first of all, do our students who complete AATH at Lake Bluff Middle School perform as well as students who took AATH at Lake Forest High School. So the early bird math. And really, since it's not our data, it's Lake Forest High School data. The high school has shared that our students perform equally well, that there's no statistically significant difference. However, since it's the high school data, we don't have that data to share with you. It's their data that's there. So Nate's going to talk a little bit about the numbers of students who have taken AATH at Lake Bluff Middle School versus at Lake Forest High School.
Right, this might give you a little bit of perspective year to year. So the first time we offered AATH in the middle school was in 2013. So that year, 11 students took it in the building and 4 students took the class before school at Lake Forest High School. In 2014-15, we had 29 students in our building and 5 at Lake Forest High School. In 2015-16, we had 38 students take it with us in the building and 1 student elected to take it at Lake Forest High School. This year, we have 30 students that are taking it with us at the middle school and 4 students at Lake Forest High School. I'm sorry, 16-17. I misspoke. Sorry, last year that was 30 and 4. And then obviously all of them are with us this year.
So,
and just to clarify, part of the reason we don't do the early bird anymore is because they changed the schedule at high school?
So that's actually the next question. So why, the next question was, why was AATH not offered at Lake Forest High School this year? So I want to clarify a couple of things from what we talked about there. So we actually have 3 math teachers at Lake Bluff Middle School who are licensed to teach high school level math classes. And I misspoke and apologize to those math teachers. But we have 3 math teachers at the middle school who are licensed to teach high school level math. The number of students who are qualifying to take that class has grown over time, as Nate just talked about. That we really felt a responsibility as a building and as a district to take that on as our own, to try and meet their needs as a building and as a district. And then further complicating that issue was the idea that they were working on a different master schedule this year. When we were working on this with Lake Forest High School, we didn't know how that was going to impact. It was, when we were talking about this, it was March and April. Their new master schedule was still theoretical. We didn't know how it was all going to shake out and really what it was going to look like. And now we know what what it has looked like for our plane and solid geometry honors students. And what that impact has looked like even just for those 4 students who are taking that class. So what we know it means now is that each of those students are missing portions of classes each day, and that each day is a different day, and it's complicated even further when we have an early release day or an assembly schedule or a different schedule in our building, or they have a different schedule in their building, something going on there. So those are the sort of factors that are a little bit of an X factor that you can't control.
So if you had to do that for 30 some odd kids, it gets
37 more plus the 4 we've already got.
Right, exactly. On top of that, I want to reiterate the idea that, and Dr. Sophie talked about this at the beginning, that we have really enjoyed so far working with Dr. Holland and with her team, and have really struck up a great conversation with them about this, and we plan to continue those conversations. These are conversations that are ongoing, and our collaboration with them and the conversation about where to offer this and what that looks like is going to continue in the future. And the other thing that is important to note here is that we've had people in the community talk with us about what's going on at Deer Path Middle School in Lake Forest 67, and Deer Path Middle School decided to offer the class within their building for the same reason, because of the schedule change and what that looked like. And as a result, actually Lake Forest High School isn't offering that early bird math class and doesn't have kids in 8th grade in their classes anymore, in their AATH classes anymore this year.
So one of the other questions we wanted to respond to was a question about how many AATH students end up retaking that course at Lake Forest High School. There are some that do that. It's a difficult question to quantify, and there's some reasons behind that, and we thought we'd bring those up. So, for example, some of the students are recommended to take an AATH course, continue on to plain and solid geometry honors, but are also very talented in other areas and are recommended for a wide variety of honors level courses. And so it's often a family decision that they make to not take the very highest sequence of math class, but choose to follow along an honors level track because they also have honors talents in other areas, and they want to manage the course load. Some kids don't feel that they're proficient enough. There are also situations where during the process of placing students at Lake Bluff Middle School, where a parent might say that they don't agree with our recommendation. In other words, they feel their student needs to be placed in the track that we're talking about, and so they may end up, through conversation and dialogue, being allowed to take that class, but in fact they weren't recommended to do so in the first place. And on occasion, those students experience difficulty and end up also retaking that course in high school. One of the advantages that we have, of course, is that a student can take that course without penalty. They can get in there, and if they feel that they're successful, move on. If they feel they need more algebra content, they have an opportunity to do that without having started their high school transcript. So those are a few of the things that go on there. But again, it's a pretty small number, even with those reasons for repeating. We wanted to talk a little bit about how we feel that offering this opportunity to experience AATH and potentially a level of challenge that hasn't previously been experienced by students to be valuable for their development as math students. We do this knowing full well that they may need to retake the course in high school. Research demonstrates and history has shown that some students require additional exposure to algebra content in order to learn the material. It's one of those things that we are wanting to be able to offer students, and our numbers and our increase over time has shown that we're experiencing great success with that level of math for students that was traditionally a small number, 4 and 5, prior to 2011.
Our students are very successful at Lake Forest High School based upon data the high school has provided us and to the community. There is not any evidence to suggest that our students are struggling at a higher rate, dropping down at a higher rate, or failing at a higher rate than the rest of the students at Lake Forest High School.
So the decision to offer AATH will be made on a yearly basis in conjunction with Lake Forest High School. Assuming the master's schedule of LFHS remains unchanged, AATH at Advanced Algebra Trade Honors at Lake Forest High School, sorry, I'm throwing a lot of letters up, would require our students to miss portions of their academic classes at Lake Bluff Middle School. We know that it is not good for kids and that it's an awfully big stumbling block to overcome. With that being said, we do have those 4 students this year taking plain and solid geometry honors, and missing portions of their academic classes that we had previously discussed.
So it's kind of interesting, I would say, that our Lake Bluff Park scores have been higher than the Lake Forest scores over the past 3 years. Our algebra readiness scores have been far higher than theirs over the last several years, and among the top in the state. And we seem to have found some things that are working, and changing course now when we're experiencing success as a program. I don't think as a director of a program and as an administrator of the program and working with Nate and talking with Dr. Sophie, and after doing a whole lot of research on what's working and on our areas of challenge, I don't think would be a wise or prudent move. I think that there's a lot of successes that we've had, and there are a few adjustments that we need to make, and we can make those.
It was stated at the Lake Forest math meeting here at the middle school by the Lake Forest High School administrative team that our math program is exemplary and that the high school is actually working toward a more progressive math curriculum like ours. Several examples were cited, and in fact it was said that Lake Forest High School teachers would really have a lot to learn from the methods that our teachers are currently using in our math classrooms.
Is that the Agile Lines curricular approach that we
Yes.
use?
Yes.
And they don't use that at the high school?
They do not. They use a very traditional approach.
That's part of it. It's also the redos and the retakes and some of the other more progressive ways that our teachers have been working with students for the past several years that have become conversations that are occurring in classrooms about math on a regular basis. That the way that math is taught on a day-to-day basis in our classrooms is very different, and that Lake Forest High School is looking to us as a guide for that nowadays. The other thing that I think is important to note is that we want to provide a high-level math course with the appropriate level of support and the appropriate level of challenge. For some students, it might even be the first time that they've struggled a little bit in a math course, and that's okay. It's actually okay to struggle a little bit in a course in middle school, and certainly it's okay to struggle in general. We want students to have an appropriate amount of struggle, and we need to find that right balance and work together to find that right balance of challenge and support so that all students can experience really an outstanding math program. So,
in conclusion, we really honor the work that we've been doing here since 2011. And in the spirit of continuous improvement, and to answer some of the concerns that parents have addressed, as well as staff have addressed, we still have some tweaking and some improvements to make. So we will be having Janice Heigl here for an additional visit to meet with our math department and make some additional changes. And we will continue to work with Lake Forest High School on really making sure we have the best trajectory for our students to assure them ultimate success for them. And that concludes our report. Since you asked for an update of math, since you did receive a letter from a community member, and that was something you asked us to do.
Anybody have any questions?
That was very helpful. Nate, you said that there's a small number of students who retake the AATH in the high school. Do you have a sense of on a percentage basis what that is?
Percentage-wise, I know we've had less than 5 per year. What I don't know is how many students would start in AATH and choose then, while they're students at Lake Forest High School, if they were to choose to move. I wouldn't know that necessarily. But again, some years it's smaller than that. I would say, yeah, it's a pretty small percentage of the 28 to 30 that we usually have taken.
Okay. Because what I've heard anecdotally is that the students are going into that class, or the next class that they would take at the high school after that, and having to make changes. And do we have any sense of like longitudinally how many students of ours actually stay on track at the high school if they're in the advanced math, are able to complete that through the high school?
Yeah, we do. We've had conversations with Joe Ricky's been very helpful with us. He's the department chair at Lake Forest High School and has actually studied that pretty closely and shared with us that there is not a statistical significant number of kids that are dropping out of that sequence.
Different
than any other feeder school.
Any other feeder school or any other Lake Forest High School.
Okay, good.
I mean, I observed that meeting. I think Mark was there as well. It didn't seem to me. It seems to me there's still an ongoing communication issue. I mean, just my observation of that night, and parents that consider whatever challenges they're facing in the high school is Lake Bluff's fault. And after hearing everything that you've said, I mean, and the evidence that we have, I don't believe that to be true. But yet, it seems that once they get there, that somehow we've shortchanged the students. So, I mean, what thoughts do you have on just ongoing communication? Because the turnout there was a lot higher than I suspected it would be. I mean, so it's a hot button issue for a lot of people. And what thoughts do you have of being prepared to share regularly with people what we're doing? Because it seems as though just my impression was the fingers are pointed back at Lake Bluff, when my impression is it's more of a high school issue than it is for us.
I have a couple comments on that before I turn it over to them. We are stuck kind of between a rock and a hard shell, because we have seen the data. It has been shared with us, but it's not our data, and so we don't have that data to share.
Mm-hmm.
And much of what you're asking for is high school data. How have they stayed the course at the high school? We don't have that data right now. That's something they share with us, but it's not our data. So that's number one. The only other thing that we talked about, which Nate is going to do after the first of the year, is because we hear these anecdotal stories, we felt it might be good for Nate to go over and do focus groups at the high school and talk to the kids about what their experiences have been with math to kind of help us gain that data.
Mm-hmm.
And certainly after we have this meeting with Janice and the math team, because the math team also has some concerns that need to be addressed, then I think that we will give some regular communication once we know more. And again, we have the fourth hurdle of we have to figure out what's going on with the high school schedule. The biggest aha moment for me, which I'm really thinking a lot about, is we can handle 4 students going to the high school, and that they're missing language arts, and that every day it's a different amount because of their schedule. You add 37 more children to that, it becomes very unmanageable, especially when we have a teacher that is not only licensed and certified to do that, but the data that we've seen shows that the kids are doing equally as well.
Mm-hmm.
However, all these anecdotal stories come out in the community, and we need to get some answers for that. So I think that we'll all be communicating once we have a little bit more data on that. But we do need to get the focus groups to actually talk to the kids.
Mm-hmm. That's a good idea.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
When they have this very select or small group of students that are fans, do they get to the point at the high school where they run out of math courses?
No, and that's the great thing, is that there's enough math for everybody, and there's calculus AB and calculus BC at the highest levels, and they are consistently rolling out new math courses that for students who want to take them. And some of them are, and this is the other piece to go back to your point, Phil, is that Lake Forest High School is really working on a lot of these trajectory pieces. First of all, to work on the course recommendation process from 8th grade to 9th grade, and then what that looks like, because they have sort of said, like, we don't want to have the number of kids changing levels. They talked about that at their meeting, that it creates a problem with scheduling and all of that other stuff. But one of the other things that they want to do is to be able to say, is to be able to eliminate some of the barriers between taking a computer science class and taking calculus AB at a junior level and a senior level, or making it easier for a student to take a couple of math courses if they wanted to in their junior and senior year. For students who are really interested in pursuing a career in the STEM fields, for those sorts of things, but they don't ever run out of math.
However, there was one dad at the meeting that said that his daughter went through that very advanced trajectory, and by the time she got to college, they ran out of math classes.
In college.
But we can't help that.
So one of the things that I might even suggest is a little bit of a celebration and maybe even a victim of our own success is that when you look longitudinally at the number of kids who are accessing that level of math and finding success compared to prior to 2011, again, we were talking about 3, 4, 5 kids who were even qualifying to take advanced algebra trig honors. Now we're talking about 35 kids. We're recognizing that there are more kids, given our changes in curriculum, that are ready for that level of math. They should be given that opportunity. But when you grow to that number, you're inevitably going to have some kids, regardless of what their standardized test scores look like, who are going to experience a rigor that they're unaccustomed to. And that's okay. And we did that with mindful, we looked at this and knew that this was not a reason to deny kids the opportunity, but we also understand that there would likely be some more kids who would experience struggle. And we need to appropriately support them. But, I've even had many parents sit in my office and say, I don't care if my child has to repeat the class. I want them to have the opportunity to find success. Now that may be a parent that changes their tune later on when it really happens.
And we've experienced that also.
It's one of those things that we want to be mindful and open about. And when we have those informational meetings, as we transition kids from 6th into 7th grade, and we're talking about the differences between the Common Core 8 class and the Algebra 1 class, we go through all of the kind of scenarios and what we want parents to go into that sequence of math knowing, as do we want our students to know that. So it's an interesting thing. But as I say, I see it as being a great success to have that many kids experiencing this level of math and doing it well.
Do you expect to see that same trend? You've seen a trend in AATH, the growth in that students. What about at the next level, the plain solid geometry class? Is it something that we may need to bring in-house eventually? Because my personal perspective is I don't like the idea of kids, their days being disrupted at the middle school and having to accommodate, to backfill what they missed. And I hate to see that on a broader scale.
We can't guess that.
It's hard to guess that. Algebra is such a foundational component of math. The middle school emphasis for us has been give our kids as strong a foundation in algebra as they possibly can have as they depart 8th grade, and whether that's completion of Algebra 1 or Algebra 2. It's algebra, and we need them to have that foundation.
It's to be determined.
What I will say is that over the last 3 years, the number has been very steady.
Yeah. The other thing that occurred to me too is the idea of doing anything at the high school is going to get even more complicated next year. It's my understanding they're introducing a different calendar next year, or within the next 2 years.
We're not talking about calendar until next month.
No, I'm saying it's already hard because of the block schedule. But if they have an earlier start because there's talk of trying to get them to finish final exams prior to the Christmas holiday, then that totally messes with all that as well. So logistical challenges are hard to overcome.
It seems as though this is a concern for a lot of our parents, and I appreciate what you're doing, and I know it's probably very time intensive trying to work with another district. So
yes, it is very time intensive. Thank you.
Anybody else?
There's one other question I had that I recall a community member asking, and I think you addressed it, but one of the concerns when Deer Path brought their kids all back into the building, as you mentioned, was that they had a high school teacher come over and teach.
A retired high school teacher.
Oh.
How does the decision made?
Okay.
And then the part of what I was hearing on the street too was people were concerned that, well, we don't have a high school teacher, but our teachers are certified to teach high school.
Yes, they are. Yeah, I understand. Okay.
What would the cost be to teach those 4 students in our building?
We would have to get a teacher. It would probably add to our FTE, that percentage, which is still probably cheaper than busing and dealing with all these teachers have to plan ahead for language arts for the class.
Right. I mean, they're missing like 30 minutes a week, right? Or more than 30 minutes a week of LA.
Yeah.
More than 30?
Wow. Yeah.
That's quite a bit.
Yeah.
I mean,
now they do gain a little bit of work time, but
Independent work time.
I mean, is that an option to look at?
Anything's always an option, and we've actually talked about that, and we actually have a teacher that might be interested in teaching that. But I'm going to be blunt. There are some people in the community, and I have to honor it because we're trying to listen to parents that feel their child is going to be is missing out by not being taught by a high school teacher. They don't realize that just because you've taught high school, if you're certified to teach high school, you have the same credentials.
Exactly.
So it's concerning because just like we pour all of our heart and soul into our kids and want the best for them, they feel like we're not doing the best for their children. And we don't have the data to show them because it's not our data to show.
Right.
What does it take to borrow the data or be able to use the data? Is there a way we can utilize that?
I would say that it will be difficult because number one, it really divides between Lake Forest and Lake Bluff, which as a high school superintendent, I'd be very guarded in that. And it also has individual student data in it. With that being said, we just got done approving the Lake Forest High School, Lake Bluff sharing of data, and so I predict that will improve in the future. But I think that's what our frustration is. We've seen the data, we look at it, we're listening to parents who feel very strongly about their child being taught by a high school teacher, and it's a struggle for us because then, it really creates major complications in the schedule. And so, this decision was made for this year, which makes lots of sense because no one knew how the high school schedule was going to shake out with before school and after school. And yet there's people that feel like their kids have really missed out on an opportunity when we have a teacher that teaches it who her kids do equally as well or sometimes better.
So one thing just to keep in mind is we're talking about a very small population of kids, even Lake Bluff and Lake Forest, and I've heard you mention statistical significance a couple of times, and I took enough math to know you have to have a big enough pool of people to get statistical significance. So I think even if we had full reign of the data, there'd be some difficulties sharing a lot of specificity.
And making generalities from it.
Right. I'm a little bit, hesitant to publish specifics between Lake Bluff and Lake Forest, or even when somebody asked me, kids who took math in Lake Bluff versus kids who took it at the high school, what percentage dropped down, and of those two groups, and we're talking about 4 kids who took it at the high school in the year that they were talking about. So I think you very quickly get to some very personal information with the size of populations we're talking about.
Especially in a small population.
For some of it we'd have to guard against that. But I've heard reference to data in all sorts of ways, including how the kids do in terms of staying with the advanced program through the high school. It seems to me, and it seems to be good data, it seems to be data you want to share, so I would encourage you to find a way to share it if you can. So.
I think it's also worth noting that I'm not standing here tonight talking to you about what a 3rd grade or 2nd grade math curriculum may have done to impact my students in 7th and 8th grade, which is essentially what we're talking about. There's a lot of variables that influence student performance as time passes. There's lots of valuable data to look at and to consider, some of which will paint a picture, and I think some of the data won't. You gotta consider what other things may be going on in students' lives where they decide to not continue on to multivariable calculus, as an example. That's a level of math most of us. I can speak for myself. I didn't take it in high school, and because they have other interests and other talents, and they're able to pursue them by not taking that course.
Any other questions at all?
No. All right, moving on. Now we're going to go to our action items. And it has just come to my attention that item 9, which was the approval of the 2-year agreement with our auditor, Baker Tilly Virchow Krause LLP, which we had talked about at our November 8th meeting, but then postponed it because we wanted to wait for an attorney review. We still do not have an attorney review. So we're going to table item, correct?
We're going to table it unless you want to approve it
without an attorney?
Subject to attorney approval.
What's the rush? Are we really...
There isn't one. I think we're fine. I think we're fine.
Yeah, so
we'll bring it when we get it back.
All right, so then we're going to move on to 9B, which is our certification of our tax levy. And part of my sheet is cut off. 9B, here we go. So Jay presented to us the tax levy hearing earlier tonight. And we all had some discussion of that. If there's any further discussion or any questions anybody wants to have or raise for the public, please do so now. Otherwise, I'm going to move on. So, not hearing anything, I'm going to ask for a motion to approve the certification of the 2016 tax levy as presented by the administration and fully included in your board package.
So moved.
Second.
Can I have a roll call vote on that, please?
Sure. Philip Hood,
Yes.
Susan Ryder,
Yes.
Mark Berry,
Yes.
John Rosen,
Yes.
Julie Gottschall, yes. Richard Haig.
Yes.
The motion is approved. All right, thank you. Now we're going to move on to our bond refunding. And we have a special honored guest here with us to answer any questions.
Tammy is back. Tammy, would you like to take the microphone?
Yeah, so I'm going to ask let's see. We discussed the bond last at our November 8th committee of the whole meeting during, and Ms. Beckworth from PMA just gave us an overview. And I would ask her to give us a summary and overview of this before we go to a motion.
Great, thank you for having me back. I have a short PowerPoint for you, largely because I want to give you an update on what's happened in the market since we last met on Election Day. And as you turn to page 2 of the presentation,
A cold presentation.
yeah, sorry, I was in the car for a while, thank you. If we look at slide 2, this is a chart we've looked at before. This is that Municipal Market Data Index, which looks at rates in the public finance world, dating all the way back here to early 2013 at different points on the yield curve. You'll be most interested in the burgundy line, which is the second from the bottom, because the bonds that will be refunded by the district, the average life of those is about 4 years, so you have maturities that go out about that duration. So we had the election again on November 8th, and the municipal bond market immediately started to experience some volatility. And the main reason for that volatility with Trump's election is because there was immediately uncertainty as it relates to his plans for fiscal policy, for tax policy, because he's at this point looked at as someone who might want to eliminate the federal tax exempt status on municipal bonds. So the bond market, like other markets, doesn't like uncertainty, and so we immediately went into a period of rising rates. And we had days where rates would go up 15 to 20 to 25 basis points in a day, which is pretty unusual. So I put a bullet point for you at the top so you could see that rates in just about a 3-week period went up about 73 basis points. And not only did we see sharp rises in rates from day to day, but you also saw issuers pulling transactions from the market because investors were just unsure of what to expect from day to day, and they would say, well, if rates went up 20 basis points today, why would I buy this bond issue when rates may go up again tomorrow and I can get a higher rate on my investment? Things definitely calmed down a bit as we got past the Thanksgiving holiday, and since the 1st of December, rates along the yield curve have started to come back down. They've gone down 10 basis points again on that 5-year rate. And when we started experiencing this volatility in early November, the thought sort of among the experts in the industry was, well, we're going to have to ride this volatility tide for a little while. Hopefully things would start to stabilize by mid-December. The municipal bond market pretty much shuts down by the end of this week for the rest of the calendar year because people are literally going on vacation and underwriting desks really shut their doors until early January. So the good news is that extreme volatility, we've made our way through that, and we're certainly hopeful that once we get to the new year, we'll see not only some stability, but we're hoping for some market improvement. It's hard to say. I mean, it could take months before we know what some of President-elect Trump's policies will be, and as they play through the processes in Washington. So a lot of what happened with rates going up in the last few weeks was really kind of building in what they expect with the Fed meeting this week and raising short-term rates. So some of this was sort of a correction because rates, as we've talked about in the municipal market, have been low for so long. So some of this correction was probably going to occur. It just happened a lot faster and more sharply than we had hoped it would. So while I don't have that crystal ball ready for you today, I wanted to just be able to share with you what's happened and help you understand how it's impacting the savings on your funding and sort of where we go from here. So if you go to slide 3, this is a chart to show you as we've looked at the remaining refunding of the 2008 bonds at different points in time. So it goes back to the first time we started tracking this back in February. Again, when we ran the numbers that I presented to you in early November and where we are today, the present value savings has gone down. We're now just over 2% on a present value basis compared to over 5% back in late February. So that's a direct result of what's happened in the market. And if we go to the next slide, I also want to share with you, we've talked about break-even points. So where we are today on this slide, looking at the left-hand side where it says the advance refunding with the gradual increase, assuming we would refund the balance of the bonds in February, and these are the same numbers you saw on the prior slide with today's update, with that present value savings on a percentage basis of about 2.3%. If rates would stay the same between now and doing that current refunding, meaning really close to the call date in 2018, if rates are the same, you can see our present value savings goes up to almost 4%. So what's that break-even point? Well, it is now 60 basis points, whereas when I was here a little over a month ago, that break-even point was about 40 basis points. So that break-even point has gotten wider. This chart on slide 5, we looked at back in early November as well. So this looks at, with the refunding you locked in earlier this year and where rates were back in late October, what would the total savings look like? And so on a total basis, the number there is 1.622 million in the yellow, and on a present value basis, it's about $1,450,000, or just under 10% on a percentage basis. Let's compare that to where we are right now. So now we have total savings. It drops to about 1.52 million. On a PV basis, about 1,350,000, or about 9.3%. To give you some perspective, because I know you were interested in this last month, when we ran the numbers last year and we had estimated what the savings would have been if you had refunded all of the 2008 bonds at once, the total savings is about $1,450,000, or on a PV basis, about $1,250,000, or about 8.6% on a PV basis. So you are still better than what our estimates were if you had refunded everything earlier this year. So that's some good news, that that bank qualified benefit you took advantage of, being under 10 million on the first refunding, that strategy is still, looking like the correct strategy. But our savings are down. We will continue to monitor market conditions, and as we have the resolutions in front of you tonight, we will certainly be updating everything based on where the market is right after the first of the year. We sometimes, regardless of other things that may happen in the market, you usually see what we call bumps in the market, which is the counterintuitive. It means rates come down just because it's the start of a new school year, or calendar year, and issuers are not as focused on selling bonds right after the first of the year. So we're hoping, just from a supply and demand theory, that will be something else that causes rates to go down and stabilize. But we will update the numbers, and as you recall, with adoption of the parameters resolution in particular, it does not bind the board to do the refunding, and it's valid until your April board election. So we will update the analysis in early January, be in touch with the administration, and continue to communicate where the market is. We'd like to still work toward a sale in late January with a closing in February, but we'll certainly keep the administration apprised as we move along. So the messenger didn't bring great news on the market, but I have a feeling you weren't totally surprised based on some of the things you've been hearing, but I wanted to give you a chance to get some further analysis on that.
Well, it's impossible to predict the market
Right.
one way or the other, whether it's
Right.
stocks or bonds. So
Right.
I think to rehash whether we did the right thing or the wrong thing is probably not even that significant. The important thing is that going forward, we make the correct decision, and I guess we have until the middle of January to do that. And even at worst case here, if it stays steady, we're still going to see significant savings.
Right. Overall, we're still seeing significant savings. And as you said, if you get to January and you're not comfortable with where the rates are, you can postpone. I mean, you could do that all the way up to your April election.
Right.
And what I always try to tell clients is, if based on where rates are at the time you're going to lock in that transaction, if you're achieving the overall goal of the district, which again, as you said, in aggregate is significant savings, then we would advise you to lock it in, because none of us can predict what the market will do. It could be worse 3 months from now. There's no doubt. Hopefully, though, we'll see some stability in the beginning of the calendar year.
Maybe as a stock market, which has to go back down
Yeah.
at some point.
Right.
I mean, it's astronomical.
Right.
This market will go in reverse as they typically do, and we'll get some benefit from that. So I think it's worth just keeping a close eye on it.
Very good point. Yeah. And I will say too, I mentioned that 3-week period right after the election where issuers were just pulling transactions from the market. transactions started pricing in earnest last week. So we're seeing bids come in, significant numbers of bids for bond issues. There's interest from investors. It's a much improved tone, and that's significant in and of itself.
So tonight we'll be asking you to approve the parameters. Again, that keeps it open until board elections in April for us to act on this.
Anybody have any further questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
So we're going to move on to a motion. May I have a motion to approve the bond refunding as presented by the administration should the market justify the bond refunding in the next 4 months?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call vote, please.
Julie Gottschall, yes. Richard Haig?
Yes.
Philip Hood?
Yes.
Susan Ryder?
Yes.
Mark Berry?
Yes.
John Rosen?
Yes.
Motion's approved. All right. Personnel report, we have none, correct? That hasn't changed since I
No,
got
that
there.
is not.
And then we have a consent agenda for tonight where we vote on.
We have to approve this resolution. So if you go back to the bond refunding,
Oh,
you
that
just
wasn't
have
on
to
my.
read those two.
It was not on my.
No,
Okay.
you just have to make sure you read those two first.
So and then.
And then just have a vote. We just have to have you re-vote on the approval of bond refunding because he's going to be very specific on what the parameters
Okay.
say.
Okay. This just in. I would like to have a motion to approve a resolution provide. Am I reading that right? For a resolution providing for the issue of not to exceed $6,250,000 general obligation refunding school bonds, Series 2017, of the district for the purpose of refunding certain outstanding bonds of the district, providing for the levy of a direct annual tax sufficient to pay the principal and interest on the bonds and authorize the sale of the bonds to the purchaser thereof.
And
If we can do them both together? Okay, and I'd also like a motion for a resolution authorizing the directing of the execution of an escrow agreement in connection with the issue of general obligation refunding school bonds, Series 2017 of the district.
And if that doesn't scare you.
So moved.
there you go.
Well, let's have a roll call vote on that.
Richard Haig?
Yes.
Philip Hood?
Yes.
Susan Ryder?
Yes.
Mark Berry?
Yes.
John Rosen?
Yes.
Julie Gottschall, yes.
Okay, the motion is approved. Thank you. All right, so now moving to the consent agenda, where we typically vote on several items at one time. I'm going to read off what is in our consent agenda, and we will have the opportunity to pull something out if somebody wants to talk about it. In this month's consent agenda, we are talking about open session meeting minutes from the November 15th, 2016 regular Board of Education meeting, closed session minutes from the November 21st, 2016 special Board of Education meeting. We were talking about our treasurer's report, our impressed report, our bills report, and our P card report. Would anybody like to have any of that pulled out for further detailed discussion?
Yes, the closed session meeting minutes from November 21st. Does anyone have those in front in hard copy?
I do.
I was not present at that meeting, by the way, it shows me.
Yeah, there's errors in that report. That was the one that took place at the middle school, correct? You've got the village,
Yes.
it says the village, and we weren't all present, and I don't think there seems to be a disconnect in that first paragraph.
Members
So
absent, and then it shows everybody.
You know what? Can we just pull that out and Julie and I will work on it and then we'll bring it back for approval next month.
All right. So I'm going to revise the consent agenda to not include closed session meeting minutes from November 21st, 2016. Any other issues that people want to pull out? All right. So may I have a motion to approve the consent agenda for December 13th, 2016 as presented by the administration, but excluding those closed session minutes from November 21st, 2016?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call vote, please.
Julie Gottschall, yes. Richard Haig?
Yes.
Philip Hood?
Yep.
Susan Ryder?
Yes.
Mark Berry?
Yes.
John Rosen?
Yes.
Motion is approved. So that concludes our action items. And finally, for tonight, we have item number 10, which is our FOIA request. This month we had 4 FOIAs, one from Smart Procure, one from Lake Forester, one from the Illinois Retired Teachers Association, and one from a local Lake County resident, which was quite extensive. Do you guys want to elaborate on any of that?
No, once again, we're in a position with the one that involved quite a bit of work. It shows up on legal bills. Again, we're required to answer these FOIAs.
Are we spending thousands of dollars answering?
Have we spent that this year? Yes.
The last time we talked about this, someone asked or requested a significant amount of information.
That's
Did we?
this
Is it the
FOIA.
same one? It's the same person?
No.
This is the same one that we briefed them on before. Yes, it is.
Who's made requests to a number of different districts.
Yes, regarding a special
And I
education
saw went through
issue.
the
Same
process
issue.
of saying it was voluminous and then her coming back and saying it
Yes,
wasn't voluminous.
same
I
one.
read through the same person. What if we give them enough to fulfill the requirement but not complete the entire request, and have them come back to us and say, well, that's not enough?
And I go back to, as administrators, we have to follow the rule of the law, and when we get a FOIA, we have to provide that information. I don't even know if you could direct me to do otherwise, but would be something I would be happy to follow up on with Terry Hodges.
I think you should.
Yeah, I do too.
Because then my name's as the FOIA officer, my name would be the one that would go to the Attorney General's office. So that's a concern of mine.
But it's not suggesting that we don't fulfill the request. We just fulfill it in a lesser approach initially to see what the reaction is. Because you've told us that on occasion people make these requests and don't even show up.
He didn't show up last year.
So
but we're taking a risk because if they do and it goes to the Attorney General.
But if they do, they can say, well, this isn't enough, and they would say, oh, we're sorry. Well, what do you want? And we'll.
You know what I would like to do with this, because it's come up a few times, and I'm concerned because I'm a FOIA officer, Kevin's a FOIA officer. I think, Jay, you've gone through the training. Our names are attached to it and our licenses are attached to it. But I think it might be better if we had Terry Hodges. She's going to have to come out for a couple things in the spring anyway. Let's have her address it with you, because I think all of you have concerns. I told you before, what I think needs to be done is we need to work with our legislators. They have no idea how much time and energy this is all taking.
I thought that. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I'm sure that we do need to work with our legislators, and they don't know what's involved with things. But beyond that, I do think that we should press with her in terms of doing a more, I don't want to say superficial, but testing the waters before we go all out on these things, and looking in the back and forth with the Gordon one.
Yeah.
The person seemed to be somewhat receptive to that.
Right.
She seemed to indicate that other school districts were doing this without being quite as diligent, perhaps. So maybe that's a good approach.
I'll have Terry address that with you guys.
I thought I learned something by reading through that correspondence back and forth about the voluminous request, and what struck me is maybe we can do less to respond to it looked like we did a lot of work just to articulate why that was a voluminous request. I was thinking, oh, that's a legal bill right there to articulate that. Maybe you could simply say, we think this is a voluminous request, to go into less detail there. Because when she came back, she was fairly reasonable, I thought, in saying, no, this is what I really need, and if you need to estimate, So I thought maybe there was a potential, possible approach there with that whole taking the position it's voluminous and maybe not writing a legal brief as to why it's voluminous, but just simply saying it's voluminous under these 5 sections and letting them come back and tell us why it's not.
So I'll have Terry come in and address that with you as a board. I think that's important.
Good.
All right. We also have the opportunity for anybody in the audience who'd like to address the board. Feel free to do so now. Not hearing anybody rush to the podium. I'm going to ask for a motion to adjourn at 8:23 p.m.
So moved. We've got a lot of.
All in favor? Aye. Oh wait, I need a second on that.
Second.
Okay. Opposed? No. We are adjourned. Thank you.
Julie can sign off.